Wow. What an amazing fight card we had in Qatar. And to cap it off, right, we had the main event between Arman Tsarukyan versus Dan Hooker. Long story short, give Arman Tsarukyan the next title shot. Like, he went through Dan Hooker with little resistance. Like, the first round was kind of interesting. Dan Hooker was landing some shots. Not to say he won the first round by any means, because Tsarukyan kind of bulldozed him. But I feel that Tsarukyan proved that he's the undeniable number one contender at this point. So, Ilya Taboria, please fight Arman Tsarukyan. Right? He just went out there and submitted Dan Hooker with an arm triangle after beating him up with ground and pound strikes. Like, he was able to thwart off all of Dan Hooker's guillotine attempts by gator rolling. Like, that shit was super impressive. And at this point, who is there at lightweight for you to fight Ilya Taboria? Not Justin Gaethje, not Paddy Pimblett. It's Arman Tsarukyan. All right, that's the only guy that makes sense right now. And seeing as how Arman Tsarukyan said that he's willing to take a quick turnaround if he fights Dan Hooker and gets through it with little resistance, I'm gonna hold Arman Tsarukyan to his word. Let's book this fight soon. If this fight doesn't get booked, I'm gonna have to start calling Ilya Taporia Duck. Right now, I have been clowning these quote unquote Armin Sarukian fans for the longest time because I still believe that all of them are secret Makhachev fans that just support Armin Sarukian because Ilya Taporia is a perceivable threat to Makhachev and his legacy. However, we have been dragging the dead cat around for too long and Arman Sarukian deserves his title shot. So if both of you guys are healthy, kick the Paramount deal off with Ilya Taporia versus Arman Sarukian. And then if Ilya Taporia wins, fuck it. Let's book the White House main card, main event. I'm sorry. Ilya Taporia versus Islam Makhachev. All right. Book this fight if Ilya Taporia beats Arman Sarukian. But we need to see Ilya Taporia fight Arman Tsarukyan first. As for Dan Hooker, good. It was a good attempt, but unfortunately, Tsarukyan is just too good, and that's why he deserves the next title shot against Ilya Taporia. All right, now speaking of which, home main event: Bilal Muhammad versus Ian Machado Gary. Oh, man. You know what that is? That's a typical Ian Gary fight. Right? Ian Gary, let me just say this. Did he beat Bilal Muhammad? Yes. Was I going to cope incredibly hard and laugh at Ian Gary's face had this been a robbery? Yes. But why is it that whenever Ian Gary fights, it's just uneventful? Like the only big parts of the fight you would remember is when he's sticking his fingers into Bilal Muhammad's eyes. Other than that, he just moves around, prancing around like a little fairy, and stick and move. He occasionally landed some good shots in the third round, but the first two rounds it was uneventful, and it was pretty close. Right, it was 1-1 going into the third round. Right. Like, I don't think Ian Gary won the second round because he didn't really land that much. I know the scorecards would say otherwise, but still. And let me just say this: this fight convinced me that not only will Islam Makhachev beat Ian Gary, I think JDM beats Ian Gary. Right? You think JDM will let Ian Gary off the hook like a Bilal Muhammad, who, I'll be quite frank, like doesn't have the greatest head movement, doesn't have the greatest footwork. JDM, on the other hand, he can really put together some nasty combinations, and it'll bounce that key head off the canvas, right? I don't want to see Ian Machado Gary get the next title shot. I know he made a great call out. I know he beat Bilal Muhammad, who was a former champion. I know that he beat Carlos Prates on short notice. But let's be honest. Do we want to see Ian Gary as the next title challenger for Islam Makhachev? No. No, we don't. All right, we do not care. All right, we want to see rather Michael Morales get it. I think Michael Morales is a much more interesting fight. And Ian Gary, I hopefully he doesn't get it. I could see the UFC giving it to him though, because he takes short notice fights and then ruins them all by being incredibly boring, sticking and moving around. But yeah, Ian Gary, he won the fight, 2-1. So congrats to him. I still don't care for him though. All right, he's still a cuck. He's still annoying as hell. I still want to see someone slump him out cold. If that's Islam Makhachev, all right, fair enough. But yeah, I don't care for Ian Gary. So please, UFC, do us a solid. Do not give him the next title shot. All right, now moving on though, we got Volkan Ozdemir versus Alonzo Manyfield. I mean, this was straight up an ass whooping from Volkan Ozdemir. He backed Alonzo Manyfield up against the cage, landing a bunch of shots. Manyfield trying to cover up, bobbing and weaving, but at the end of the day, Volkan Ozdemir is a little bit too good with his timing and his defense. Manyfield's like swinging arm punches, unfortunately, didn't work because Volkan Ozdemir can also keep up with Manyfield's athleticism. And Ozdemir just brutally flatlines him up against the cage and gets it done with relatively no resistance. Right now, unfortunately for Volkan Ozdemir, he's kind of fought everybody in the division, but I think he deserves a good matchup after this because that was a very quick knockout. I know it wasn't Carlos over quick, but still, it was actually really impressive to see Volkan Ozdemir just beat the crap out of Alonzo Manyfield like that. So hopefully Volkan Ozdemir gets a next good matchup for his next fight if he fights with some level of activity. Well, you don't know about that for sure because it is Volkan Ozdemir after all. But still, it was a good win, and hopefully he gets a reward from that. Moving on though, we got Jack Hermanson versus Mike Debek Oralby. I mean, the caveman does it once more. You know, he knocks out Jack Hermanson via Ooga Booga. And as for Jack Hermanson though, yeah, I think it's time. Yeah, I think it's really time for you to consider retirement. Like, because that's the thing. You got knocked out by Gregory Rodriguez in the first round, and then you went down a weight class where you're even more weight deprived. And now Mike Debek, right? Fair enough. He has some solid power in his hands, but he's not known as this crazy KO artist. Right? Mike Tebek Orobai was known as more of a submission guy, but in this fight, Orobai did not respect much of anything Jack Hermanson had to offer on the feet. Like, yes, he was getting tagged up, but that was because Orobai was trying to find his range and trying to get in the pocket, and that's what Orobai did to eventually find the right overhead over Jack Hermanson. Down goes Jack Hermanson. Mike Orobai, the caveman. You know, the hype is back. I think 170 is a very good weight class for him. But I think this also has to do with the fact that Jack Hermanson should not be at 170 for the first place. All right. I'm not taking away anything from Mike Orobai, though, because it is kind of tricky to KO Jack Hermanson. You know, Joe Pfeiffer couldn't do it. But yeah, I think it's time for Jack Hermanson to reconsider his career. But as for Maita Begorobai, I think he'll do very well at 170. Moving on though, this is really sad. But Waldo Cortez Acosta knocks out Shamil Gaziev in the first round. It's a sad day for all of us. Unfortunate. You know, the GOAT will not be getting a title run anytime soon. Waldo Cortez Acosta shows Shamil the Blob Gaziev levels in the Blob heavyweight division. Now, I will say this. I think Waldo Cortez Acosta has really grown on me. I used to be a huge doubter of this guy when he used to go to like uneventful, lackluster decisions with Andrei Arlovsky and taunting former champion Andrei Arlovsky as if he was schooling him on the feet, as if he's the next big thing. But over time, Waldo Cortez Acosta just kept on winning, and his performances have become more and more impressive. All right, the Shamil Gaziev knockout, the Ante Dalia knockout. even surviving Sergey Pavlovich to a decision, in hindsight, that's pretty impressive, right? I know it's the ghost of of Sergey Pavlovich, but at the same time, though, like Pavlovich was still hitting some pretty nasty bombs, and Waldo Cortez Acosta was able to eat all of them. So it is very interesting to see whether or not Waldo Cortez Acosta can get the next title shot. In To be honest, I think Waldo Cortez Acosta deserves the next title shot over Cyril Gahn at this point. Like, what does Cyril Gahn even do other than cheat his ass off, fight once a year, arguably shouldn't even deserve the title fight in the first place. Like, what does Cyril Gahn even do? And he was tuning up Tom Aspinall. It was one round. Like, it was one round, and the fight ended because he decided to cheat. So Waldo Cortez Acosta, I would not be shocked if he gets the next title shot. And you know what? I might even campaign a Waldo Cortez Acosta title shot against Tom Aspinall over Cyril Gahn at this point because I think that would be a pretty interesting fight considering how much Waldo Cortez Acosta has improved, as well as the beef that Cortez Acosta has generated with Tom Aspinall. Overall, though, very solid performance against Shamil the Blob Gaziev, especially considering you flew out to Qatar on like 3 days' notice. So yeah, shout out to Waldo Cortez Acosta. I think he should be rewarded with either the number one contenders fight or a title shot against Tom Aspinall. Moving on, we got Tagir Ulambekov versus Kyoji Horiguchi. Wow, how good is Kyoji Horiguchi actually? Like man, he destroyed Tagir Ulambekov. Now, round one was somewhat competitive. You know, Tagir Ulambekov was getting his takedowns and stuff. But starting from round two, Kyoji Horiguchi on the feet, putting belt to ass. Even on the ground, he was dominating Tagir Ulambekov. And that's Ulanbekov's specialty. Right? I expected Kyoji Horiguchi to win. What I didn't expect for him was to outright dominate Tagir Ulanbekov and find the submission in the third round after beating the crap out of him on the feet. Right. Kyoji Horiguchi's back. He called for a title shot against Alexander Pantoja. I don't know if that's going to happen necessarily, but that was a really impressive performance. All right, Kyoji Horiguchi has put himself back in the top 10 of the flyweight division. I would not be surprised if he gets a title shot in maybe like 1 or 2 years. I don't know. Depends on the matchups he gets. All right. I could see him losing some matchups, but I can also see him winning some matchups. Like, what's someone in mind? Like maybe Aslam Mabayev, who was on the prelims earlier, as well as Steve Erceg, who's like close to the title. Oh, like a Brandon Royval maybe, but it kind of depends on whether or not he gets through Manel Cap. But either way, though, I think Kyoji Horiguchi really showcased a masterclass MMA performance against Tagir Ulanbekov. Overall, for someone who was like 35 years old, who hadn't fought in the UFC in quite some time, to make a returning debut and to put a statement like that, I think that warrants Kyoji Horiguchi a good matchup. Hopefully, the UFC thinks so as well. We're not entirely sure, but congratulations to Kyoji Horiguchi for getting the round three submission over to Tagir Ulanbekov. Moving on, though, we got Luke Riley versus Bogdan Grad. Now, I'm not gonna lie, the first round was kind of shaky for Luke Riley. Bogdan Grad was looking pretty good out there, landing a bunch of shots. But in the second round, I mean, immediately, Luke Riley starts to mount some crazy offense with a bunch of combinations and ends it with a left hook that badly drops Bogdan Grad. And then from there, Luke Riley, nasty ground and pound shots, and then gets the TKO over Bogdan Grad. I don't know if Luke Riley's gonna make a run to the rankings, but he is pretty fun. And what I will say that he does well is he does well building into fights. Right? He's done this a lot during Cage Warriors. You know, the first round's very iffy. But then as the fight progresses, he tries to mount some kind of long combination offense and then eventually puts his opponents out. I don't think that he will stumble upon like difficult competition. right? Especially those who have good finishing instincts early on in the fight. But Luke Riley's pretty fun to watch. I think he's a name to keep out for in the featherweight division. And with the right matchups, I can see Luke Riley making a run at least to the rankings of the featherweight division. Moving on, though, we got Nicholas Dalby versus Sagid Ismagakayev. I don't know how to pronounce that name, but like I think that's how you pronounce it. But anyways, though, Nicholas Dalby wins via split decision. Now, I'm actually glad that I was wrong for this fight because I picked Sagi to win, but Nicholas Dalby ultimately got the split decision. All right. Now, I am happy about that because I get to say this with no repercussions whatsoever. Right? Because had I said this when Sagid Ismagakayev won the split decision, I would be labeled as an Islamophobic. But this was a terrible fight. This was a terrible fight to watch. It was boring as hell. It was mostly Nicholas Talby landing better shots slightly, as well as hugging Ismagakayev up against the cage. Now, had Ismagakayev done that, I would be consistent and call it a shit fight. The only difference is, though, the Dagestani fans will call you Islamophobic for calling it a dog shit fight. So, thank you, Nicholas Dalby. Right? You kind of saved my point about smudge wrestling and boring fights. Right? Like, these are all boring regardless of who this is. Congrats to Nicholas Dalby for still winning, though. All right. I did not think he was going to do that. But yeah, that's my entire point about this fight. This was not a great fight to watch, but because it was Nicholas Dalby, I'm allowed to say that, all right, without being labeled as Islamophobic. And I think you guys should take away from this fight that anybody can have a shit fight, right? Anybody can hold people up against the cage, and you are within your right to call it a shit fight. Anybody can smudge grapple for like 2 to 3 rounds, sometimes five in championship fights, and you have the right to call it a shit fight from the guy who won. All right, let's just call it what it is. This was a terrible fight, but the only difference is it was the Dagestani that was on the receiving end of the loss. All right, now moving on, though, we got Alex Perez versus Asua Mabayev. I'm not gonna lie. Alex Perez, why did you shoot a takedown in the third round? I have no idea. Right? Because the first 2 rounds you were doing so well on the feet against Asul Mabayev. You actually did better in the grappling by reversing positions at times, which all right, fine, I get it. But at the same time though, why are you shooting a your head on the outside for a double leg in the third round? I don't understand that. Right? The only way Asu Amabayev is gonna win a fight is by a Hail Mary submission. And by you engaging with Asu Amabayev in the grappling by shooting a double leg with your head outside, you've given Asu Amabayev the chance to latch up a tight ass guillotine and ultimately submit you in the third round. All right. This was actually going about as what I expected, which is why I'm really salty about this because I picked Alex Perez to win via decision. But unfortunately, Alex Perez rain lagged. All right, it happens to everybody. All right, I'm not gonna be holding your feet on the fire that much. But yeah, it was kind of disappointing to see Alex Perez kind of throw this fight. But yeah, as for Astral Mabayev though, um, I don't know. It still doesn't convince me that you're gonna be a top contender. Right? We kind of seen you get dismantled by Manel Cap. But still, though, it was a good finishing sequence. All right, it was a good finishing sequence. You still got pieced up by Alex Perez for 2 rounds, but hey, you capitalized on Alex Perez's mistake, and I guess you're gonna be looking back to climbing up the rankings of the flyweight division. All right, now speaking of which, we got Abdul Rahman Yakayev versus Rafael Sequeira. Abdul Rahman Yakayev just destroyed Rafael Sequeira in 33 seconds. You know, there's nothing really much to talk about this fight. Landed a wheel kick partially on the guard, made Rafael Sequeira back off, and as soon as they both entered into range, Yakayev just dropped him with a head kick. I mean, they're like, what do you even say about this? It's like it was an impressive performance, yes, And visually, it was better than anything we have ever seen from an opponent of Rafael Sequeira. But still, though, it is Rafael Sequeira. Rafael Sequeira shouldn't even belong in the UFC. Regardless, I think Abdul Rahman Yakayev, I think he is a prospect to be on the lookout for. Do I think he's going to get into the rankings? Hard to say because it is Rafael Sequeira. But visually, I think he is a very well rounded fighter. I do believe he'll cause problems for a lot of the guys at the like the 10 to 15 range of the rankings right now. It's just a matter of can he beat guys that are better than Rafael Aguero. But either way, though, very impressive performance from Abdul Rahman Yakayev, and I think he's a prospect to be out on the lookout for in 2026. Moving on, though, we got Beksat Almakan versus Alessandre Topuria. I went with Beksat Almakan to win this fight. But Alessandro Taporia was able to win via decision. I think it was a pretty impressive showcase from Alessandro Taporia. Right? I know he doesn't have the same pizzazz and the one punch knockout power that his younger brother does, but I think Alessandro Taporia is very good at defense, boxing defense specifically. He's very good at getting takedowns. Right? He's got good timing in his double legs. The one thing I will say though, his footwork kind of concerning. I do think someone who's close to like the top 10, right, who's a primary striker can be like causing problems for Alessandro Topuria, especially if they cause a lot of leg kicks because Topuria doesn't really defend leg kicks all that well. But either way though, Alessandro Topuria showed me that he is a legitimate prospect to be out on the lookout for because I thought that Bekzat Amakan was the next big prospect to be out on the lookout for. But I don't know if Alessandro Tapora is gonna get to the belt. All right, I think he will come undone eventually, but I don't think it's gonna happen until he gets into the top 10 of the bantamweight division. So yeah, good job from Alessandro Taporia. Uh, round one was a little bit shaky, but then again, it is Bekzat Almakan. Bekzat Almakan is at his best in the first round, and eventually Taporia started making his reads. Again, his shoulder rolls and his hands are very clean. His head movement's clean. I just wish he had better footwork. He crosses his feet a lot, and that kind of hinders him from really getting any finishes on the feet. But still, though, it was a pretty impressive performance, and I do believe that he has better overall grappling than his brother. I don't know. Maybe he's not fighting the highest level of opposition, but he uses it a lot more than Ilya Taporia. That's what I'll say. So yeah, good job from Alessandro Taporia. Hope to see him fight pretty soon. All right, now moving on though, we got Ismail Nardiev versus Ryan Loder. I went with Ryan Loder on this fight. Why did I go with Ryan Loder on this fight? I have no idea, but Ismail Nardiev gets it done in the first round. Nasty knockout. Unfortunate for Ryan Loder, he got caught badly at this point, he's like what 35 years old. Somehow he won the Ultimate Fighter last year. Like it kind of shows you that the Ultimate Fighter is completely dead. Ismail Nardiev bounces back from a loss to Junyoung Park. You know, I don't think he's bottom feeder. That's what I'll say. But as for Ryan Loder, though, it's tough out there. All right, I don't know what you do from here. I would suspect that Ryan Loder gets cut, but I don't know if that's going to necessarily happen. But either way, though, Ismail Nardiev gets it done. I believe it was with the right hand over the top, knocks out Ryan Loder badly. And unfortunately for Ryan Loder, I don't know if he's going to be able to fight again anytime soon. All right, now moving on, though, we got Nurullo Aliyev versus Shamrock. I went with Nurullo Aliyev on this fight. I will say though, it was more fun than I anticipated. Nurullo Aliyev actually threw some hands, especially early on. Shamrock was getting badly hurt, but Aliyev not the greatest finisher on the feet, so he couldn't put away Shamrock. Even though Shamrock, how do I put this nicely? He refused to fight. Literally did nothing. Just kind of pranced around for 3 rounds, occasionally throwing a shitty high kick. All right, he doesn't really. I don't know what he does well. Right? I guess his jujitsu's good, but he wasn't close to submitting Nurullo Aliyev ever. And on the feet, Shamrock is so slow. So either way, though, Nurullah Aliyev, yes, he's good, but at the same time, though, I think it's just Shamrock being absolute garbage. I don't know how Shamrock even made it to the UFC. I don't know how Shamrock even is getting all this hype in the first place. All right. In hindsight, he's fighting absolute scrubs at Octagon. So congrats to Nurullah Aliyev, I guess. But at the same time, though, I think it's just more to do with Shamrock not being UFC caliber, and I wouldn't be surprised if the UFC send him back to Octagon pretty soon. Last but not least, we got Marek Bulo versus Denzel Freeman. I went with Denzel Freeman. I did no tape study on this. I just kind of picked Freeman based on his opposition, and I was right. But this was a lot more uneventful than I thought. I thought Marek Bulo, the BJJ specialist, who has got 6 victories by ground and pound and submission, I thought that Marek Bulo would be the guy to try to initiate some grappling, but he didn't do any of that. He just was content with getting outstruck by Denzel Freeman for 3 rounds. And Denzel Freeman barely let his hands go. He just landed slightly more than Marek Bulo. Overall, a terrible fight. Honestly, considered going back to sleep after watching this, but I'm glad I didn't because the rest of the card wasn't that bad. Overall, I'm gonna have to say this card was. I'm gonna say it was like a 7.5 out of 10, maybe an 8. A couple of stinky performances early on. The co-main event definitely didn't help whatsoever, but overall, there were a lot of good finishes on this card, and there were a lot of fun matchups that can be made with the winners of UFC Qatar. I'm gonna come out with my fights to make video for tomorrow, but other than that, I think that's it for today. If you guys want to see more videos like this, please make sure to like and subscribe so we can monetize this channel. Let me know in the comments down below how you guys rated UFC Qatar overall, as well as Arman Tsarukyan, because I'll be honest, I think there's no denying that Tsarukyan deserves the next title shot, regardless if you think he's gonna win or not. Anyways, though, that'll be it for today, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.